there, it's Chrissi from Total Fluency. It's the end of week 6 and I'm here in Thailand visiting our Austrian friends Achim and Elfie. Before we get started with the statistics, what I'd like to do is go through SMART goals again with you, which is what we covered in week 1. So the S in SMART was for specific, and specifically I'm going to be learning German to B1 or B2 standard, and that's going to take me around 4,500 fluency units. I'm planning to do that in less than 5 hours each week in a 25-week period. The M is for measurable, so we'll be measuring my progress at the end of the programme by taking an exam in April 2020, and I'd also like to be able to have this conversation in German with you guys, and I'd like to be able to start listening to audiobooks and watch films, because that's a great way to maintain and enjoy a language. The A is for attainable. So you'll remember at the beginning of the programme I hope to be learning at approximately 40 fluency units per day, and I was basing that rate on my ability to learn French and Spanish at that rate. However, a Germanic language is a little bit different. Fortunately for me, I've not yet encountered any problems learning German, and I'm on track with an A grade. The R in SMART is for relevant. So that's really about what I'm learning in terms of fluency units. I want to be learning the right fluency units in the right order. And having arrived here in Thailand, I've had the opportunity to test that out by chatting with Achim and Elfie, and I've also met a nice Swiss man next door and chatted with him in German, and it's all looking good so far. The T in SMART is for tracking. So let's have a look at my statistics. So here you can see that I've learned 573 fluency units now, and I've done a total of 17 hours study. So I'm on track there with my A grade, and I've already saved 133 hours over a student on an intensive traditional course. Now, the other thing that we'd like to start tracking are the skills that you use in language. So traditionally it's reading, writing, listening and speaking. Last week we looked at reading assessments, and this week we're going to move on to listening assessments. We always group those two together because reading and listening are about the consumption of a language, where you can't control the vocabulary that's being thrown at you. So in order to get a good grade at my exam, what I'd really like to be able to do is to listen to German comfortably at full speed. Now, in order to do that, I need two things. I need a decent vocabulary, and I also need to be able to process language in real time so that I can keep up with whoever's speaking to me. So let's have a look at how I'm getting on. This is the first sentence that I had a look at on my listening assessment. So as you can see, the English translation is how this book came about and why. So the first thing I did was I listened to this sentence inaudible. I was listening to it full speed and with a native speaker, and all I really heard was something, something, something and something. So as you can see, I'm really not passing that very well at all. However, when Bruce read this to me, and he was speaking at full speed, but he broke it down into chunks, I was able to translate a lot more, as you can see, how this book started and why. And I even had time to take the word Endstand, which I don't know, and guess from the context. Finally, I looked at reading this sentence. So with reading, I was able to have more time again, and as you can see, I actually refined my guess of the translation of Endstand and came to how this book came about and why, which was an almost perfect translation. So as you can see, knowing the words is not enough. In the example we've just looked at together, I know the words in that sentence, or most of the words, but when it was read to me at full speed, I really had very little idea of exactly what was going on. And that's because there are two skills here. It's the vocabulary, but it's also the processing of that speech as it comes into your brain. So processing of audio input is something of a critical skill in terms of language learning. And one of the reasons that Total Fluency Method is so successful is that we take these skills, and what we look to do is identify and refine the sub-skills that make up that critical component of your language ability. So when we're looking at audio processing, let's break that out. The first component that we want to talk about is parsing. So that really means listening to a stream of language and being able to identify the individual words and make those out and see them in your mind. The second part is to translate them back into English or your native tongue. But the third and most important component of this process is to be able to automate those two stages so that you've got enough bandwidth or brain power to derive meaning from what you've heard and store that information in order to build a whole sentence or a whole phrase. So here we are, let's look at this second sentence. As you can see, the English translation is, as a young man in New York, I was very unhappy. Now you can see that in item 1 I'm translating that when I hear it at full speed as something 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 New York, something something happy. In fact, you can see I haven't even heard it as unhappy, I heard it as happy. However, when Bruce breaks it down, he speaks at full speed but in small chunks.
Als jonge man in New York war ich sehr unglücklich.
And I'm then able to get the translation almost exactly right, except for than, which I mistranslated due to limited vocab. And therefore we can see that the key problem here for me is processing speed. So the question is, how do we get better at that? So my tip for you this week is to get somebody to do chunking with you. Find a nice piece of text and get a sympathetic friend to sit down and read it to you. Read it at full speed but in chunks, so leaving little gaps in between every 2 or 3 words. And if you'd like to learn more about chunking, you can check out Bruce's video next week on chunking. And that's all for this week, so I'll see you next week.